Okay, let's start. Okay, so last I think we have seen RMI, right? So any questions on RMI? It's clear how it is done. So let's proceed to the next topic, which will be on HTTP. So today, and what we'll do is we'll look at the HTTP protocol. Fine. Okay, so what is this HTTP protocol? What is it for? Okay, HTTP is hypertext transfer protocol. Okay. Fine. What is it used for? For sending? All protocols will have request and responses. Yeah, it's common, right? A very common thing. Most of the protocols they'll have a request and a response. So yeah, what's typical about HTTP purpose? Where do we find it being used most commonly? Huh? Okay, we have URLs being used here. That's one thing. Okay, and what's the most common client for this? What is the most common client? What is the most common client application? The most common client application using the HTTP protocol. Browser? It's the browser, fine, which is our typical HTTP client. Okay. So what we like to understand is what is this HTTP protocol? What's the format of the request? What's the format of the response? Okay. Fine. What's the purpose? Yes. It says hypertext transfer protocol. So what does it suggest?
It is used for transferring various messages and files, like sharing among the various clients on website.
Various type of. It's actually a protocol used for exchanging rather because yes, it says transfer. So transfer can be in either direction. Okay. Exchanging content and content of any type. Earlier, yes, it was mainly concentrating on hypertext. Okay, hypertext was HTML mainly. Okay, but it's not just about hypertext. Any kind of content can be transferred using HTTP protocol. Okay, well, it has a very simple kind of a format: the request and the response in HTTP protocol. Fine. Okay, let's start with the typical URL. Yeah. How do we have a URL for HTTP protocol? It would start with HTTP colon slash slash. There will be some host. Okay, there is some host here. Okay, fine. There is an optional part which can be colon and some port number. Okay, fine. Then slash some resource. Okay, here is some path to a resource. Right? Some path, it can be a full path to a resource. Okay, fine. What happens when we use this?
The sender requests a particular port number requesting that particular service of
First thing, yeah, making a connection. And this information is useful for making a connection. Okay, fine. On this host, specific port number. If you don't specify port number because of HTTP, typically using port 80. Okay, if not specified, port 80 is used. Fine. Then make a connection and then use the HTTP protocol. Fine. The client typically makes this. So you give this to a. This is your input to a typical HTTP client. The client knows that okay, I need to connect to this particular place, and then use the HTTP protocol to send your request. Fine. What is it that you are requesting? We are requesting this resource. Fine. That's a resource you are requesting. Okay, whatever is here, fine. After that, that's the resource you are requesting, but this request has to be following the HTTP protocol. Okay, so what is the typical HTTP protocol look like? Okay, fine. In HTTP protocol, what we have is the first, fine, the various lines. Initial lines will be pure ASCII lines, fine, and then we'll have ASCII text, and then yes, of course, it can be it depends on what kind of content is being transferred. Okay, let's see what it is, right? The typical format of HTTP request, right? It will be, yes, this will result in a request going to the, this we call as the server, right? This host port. So it will be resulting in a request, HTTP request going to this server, fine? The server will process the request and give a response. Okay, so there is a format of the request, there is a format of the response, and there's a specific well-known format for the request and response, fine, and you will receive a response in which most of the time there will be some kind of a content which will come from the server. Okay, as part of a response you'll get a content, and the HTTP client typically is the one who would, okay, in this case most of the time it is the browser is simply rendering the response which it has received. It just displays the response which it is receiving from the server. Okay, fine. So let's look at the format of the request, right? If you give this, what is it that goes to the server? Okay, what will go to the server will be something like, okay, because you keyed in this, right? It will say, okay, make a connection, and then on that connection, fine, send a request, which will look like, okay, it will say get, fine, get. What is it that we want to get? Okay, so the resource, whatever is the resource here, that entire thing, fine, the resource that goes here, okay, fine, and then this I have to get using which protocol? So using, I have to get this using which protocol? HTTP, fine. So it will just say, okay, follow the HTTP slash version, fine, so I might say 1.1, fine. I want, get me this resource, and that's the protocol to be used. Protocol and version, it's a protocol and version, fine. Okay, so if you have a very old day browser, probably, fine, it might Fine, very old. It would have to be really old. Okay. Then it might say, oh, 1.0. Which protocol version? Oh, I'm following 1.0. Fine. Okay. In HTTP protocol, we have first line, the request, HTTP request. The first line of HTTP request is nothing but what is this? What is get here? It's only get, or some other things can also go here. Yeah. It's known as the method. Fine. Which method to use? When we have various methods which are possible. Fine. So first line of your request has nothing but method. Method, then resource, and then protocol version. That's the first line. Instead of get, it might be post, or it might be head, put, delete, and there are various options which are available, various methods are here which can be used here. Okay, so fine, there are various methods with different purpose. Okay, but typically, yes, in if you are keying in a URL and putting a URL, the browser uses get. Okay, fine. You get a response. As part of a response, you are shown some screen, okay, where you might be submitting a form. When you submit a form, you have an option of post also. It might be a get or it might be a post. So the request which goes from here will say it will still look like this. It will be post, and oh, there has to be some resource to which it is posting. Okay, fine. So that's the first line. But then, yeah, there are various things which the browser will have to inform. It's not the in this protocol. It's not just about the browser saying I want that. Okay, it's not just that. Fine. It will also be about browser talking about itself. Fine. See, it's HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. The two will that the client and server here in HTTP are going to be connecting for one particular purpose, and then they will disconnect. They forget each other. For the server, there's so many clients who are just coming and giving various kinds of requests. Right? We have so many different types of browsers also, and non-browser also. Fine. There are those uh, crawlers, and we say oh, we have a crawler, right? What's a crawler? Yeah. Heard about crawler?
लिंक जो फाइंड करता है मीन्स अगर एक स्पेसिफिक
Hmm.
जगह कोई फोल्डर में
Or we call it as robot also, right? Robot. Yeah. What is that?
लिंक क्लॉरर
Okay. You have a link. Yeah. So what is a crawler going to do?
if there is an image stored in a specific folder or any location
Mhm.
you will crawl for that
Crawl means
jump or go through it
okay.
to specify the destination so he will crawl for the link or that specific file कोई
Okay.
लोकेशन पे हमने रख दिया है
Hmm.
फाइल जो हमको फेच करनी है
Okay.
और
So
वहां का हमने पाथ दे दिया
you have given a path.
We have given
Okay.
a path.
So that even a browser will do it, right? Yeah. So one thing, yes, the crawler is also a HTTP client. Right? It's actually connecting to those resources and seeing if there is a change or anything has happened in that content, right? It can do that. It can do. Fine. You can have crawlers for various purposes. Fine. To find out various keywords, identify keywords and other things, right? Oh, we say keywords. Oh, fine. Okay. Fine. We'll come to that keyword also later. Fine. But first line is this. It's not just sufficient to say I want this resource. Okay. This browser is a text-based browser. Yeah, you do have a text-based browsers, not very commonly used now, but yes, you can have text-based browsers also, and they're not capable of displaying an image. Fine. In which case, what should be done? Fine. There's no point in the server trying to send an image. And there's so many things which can be saved, right? Resource can be saved. So what one should do, what the browser should do, or what the client should do, client should talk about its capabilities also. Or sometimes, okay, you might have this client informing the server that I'm capable of, you can send me the response in a compressed format also, and I have the capability of uncompressing and understanding that. So you can send me in gzip format. Okay, fine. So the capabilities of the browser can be sent here. Capabilities of the browser can be sent here. So what we have here is in HTTP protocol, in HTTP request, one, you can say this is my request line which shows which resource I want, but this is then followed by a number of header lines. Fine, this is my request line. Fine, this is nothing but a typical request line which will be like this, and then we have headers. Okay, the purpose of headers, lot of other information, related information needs to be sent to the server. Fine, talking about its own capabilities, or I can understand so and so content type. Fine. Okay, so lots of headers are there. The headers, a typical headers will be in the form of header form. The header is in the form of header name, okay, you have a header name, colon, and one space followed by some value here. Okay, typically key value pair. Key is the header name. Okay, fine. Okay, example of header could be saying, okay, the yeah, it could be something which says agent colon, and here this agent is Mozilla Firefox. See, because it is known that it's a Mozilla Firefox, certain things on the server side will say, okay, oh, these are the kind of tags it will understand, these tags it won't understand. Fine. The server can change the response. It can process, it can use this information in its processing part. Okay, and Mozilla slash Firefox, whatever. There might, fine, it's not exact, fine. It will be dependent on, it's just dependent on what the browser wants to send. It can send a header saying, okay, agent is so and so. Fine. Plus, when I say this is HTTP protocol, is if you have a GET request, that's one. But instead of GET, you might even have a POST. If you got a POST request, it is capable of sending content. Parameters can be sent in this also. Fine. Parameters are part of the resource name. And when I say resource, fine, resource will be something slash something something. Then it can append question mark. Okay, fine. Name equal to some value and name equal to some value. So this can be there. So parameters, fine. If you are thinking of parameters, yeah, which get host can have, yeah, this can have, okay, in post you can have many parameters. Yeah, this will be limited. Okay, Okay, but where do the parameters go? Not in the headers. Okay, okay. But then what you are having is, okay, let me show the overall syntax of a request. Okay, the overall syntax for a request, a typical request looks like, fine. You can think of HTTP request being, so HTTP request. You can divide it into three parts. One is a request line, and I'll put it as the request line. The first line which we have, followed by headers. Okay, there'll be number of headers. Okay, and a blank line to end the headers. So we have a blank line. Think of a blank line for end of headers. A blank line indicates no more headers. So you'll have a number of header lines, and then a blank line for end of headers, and then in some request, for example, not in case of a get. Okay, get would not have it, but when it is a post, okay, you can have the content. The content can come here. Okay, after headers, a blank line to indicate there are no more headers, and then if there is a content, there will be content. If there is no content, nothing. Fine, content is optional. Okay, fine. In request, a get request would not have a content. Post request will have content. Okay, fine. In post request, yes, what is the content going to be like? Typically,
Username, password.
okay, if yes, if it is the post with the form being submitted, okay, when you have the form being submitted, yes, it would look like username equal to a value and password equal to value. It's going to be that way. And parameters, if it's parameters which are to be submitted, fine. But sometimes it's not only parameters, anything else which can be bigger than just it's just about passing parameters. How images? Yes, images. You have
File
upload.
upload.
When you upload something, right? It's a client who is sending a content. Okay, a client is sending a content, and for that, yes, you will typically have the headers have to describe about the content. That's one thing.
What type of image it is.
How will the server know how to interpret the content? It understands as end of headers. It understands as a content, but then how does it know how to interpret the content? What kind of content it is? So content type, description of the content is again through header. Okay, fine. So for example, some of the headers which are for describing the content, it will be content type colon, fine, it might multi-part form data, or it might be a multi-part form data, fine. If it's multi-part, then it might have to specify a delimiter. And you even have something like, these are some typical headers I'm talking about, content length and the value. How long is the content part? Fine. Whether it has done a compression. Fine. So there'll be so there are well-known headers here. Okay, it would even specify, no, it won't specify here. Okay, there can be a header to indicate if modified since. If modified since. When these might not be the exact spellings for the header names, but something on the lines which says if modified since, and there'll be a typical format in which the date has to be specified, date and time. So the idea here is the browser is asking for a content and saying, you send me the entire content only if it has been modified after this time. If it's not been modified, you can just give a response which indicates there's no change. Fine. So unnecessary. You don't need to be downloading the whole of the content which you already have. Maybe there is some caching which is done. Okay. And there are so many things which are there because HTTP protocol can go over a proxy server, and the request might be using a proxy. Fine. So there will be headers which are related to the proxy server. And there are so many. And so HTTP protocol has request line, a number of headers. Headers are nothing but all kinds of information which can be useful to a server. Fine, which can be used by the server. Okay, so there'll be all such things, and then if there are any parameters or any such thing or content, any content which the client is uploading, okay, all that will be in the content part. Okay, if there is a multi-part, yes, what will be used? Delimiter. So even information about delimiter has to come. If there is a content, the description about the content, metadata related to the content has to be part of headers. And so when we say, oh, we have protocol HTTP protocol 1.0, yes, in 1.0 we have one set of request headers. Fine. These headers, I'll call them as request headers. Fine, just not headers. We'll call them as request headers. Okay, it will even talk about, yes, agent, as I mentioned, agent. Oh, this is the browser. The browser gives its identity. Okay, fine. So yes, a server can know, which typically, sometimes you get a message, oh, this thing will work only on Internet Explorer. How do you get that?
Browser specific.
But how do you get that?
Some tags or anything, some tags or some elements.
No, no. How do you get this? How do you get this response? Because your browser, put that agent header. In the agent header, it is saying, okay, I'm Internet Explorer. Now, there's some typical value which the Internet Explorer is using, i.e. something, something. Okay, so it's looking for that, right? Oh, if it is I, then I'll give this content. Otherwise, I'll give a response which is saying. So there's a processing on the server. Now that can be fooled, right? You need to change your agent header, and you need to have a browser which allows you to change the agent header. Fine, specify. Oh, this is, don't send your typical agent header. Put this in the agent header, and yes.
So the agent method, that is our browser or our the agent that
Okay, who is sending all this?
server
The browser request. Who is sending the request?
server browser
Browser is sending to the
server.
server. So yeah, we don't have to write all this. We don't have to specify all these headers. Fine, they are prepared by the browser. So browser typically says, okay, I'll always send agent as so and so. Fine, each browser has them. Fine. So most of the browsers have a fixed value. Fine, there are a few browsers which in their configuration settings, preference settings, they allow you to specify what do you want me to send as agent. And you can even set that also. Okay. Huh? Yeah. Clear? The syntax is clear. There's a header. Okay. There's another thing why this would be useful. There are some certain resources which will require authentication. Server needs to know your identity. Oh, what's your identity? So browser will typically ask you to enter username and password, establish your identity. Okay, and if there is some information about the identity, that information will always be sent to the server. So there will be header to talk about the authentication which has taken place. Oh, this browser, this client has been authenticated and he is found to be so and so. Of course, it will not be in clear text, it will be in a encrypted format or hashed format, fine, and then it will be sent. Okay, so lot of information. It's not just about asking for a resource. When you put a URL, you're just saying, I'm asking that resource, but it's not just that resource which is being sent to the, a request for a resource being sent to the server. Of course, that's the main idea. I want that content, right? I want that resource here. But along with that, lot of other information also has to be sent, and that's what the header is used for. Okay, plus sometimes you also may be sending your content. If you are sending content, uploading a file, or even when you are posting, you will have the content part. Okay, if there is content, you have additional headers just to describe the content also. Here headers, plus you have typically got headers related to what we call as cookies. Heard of cookies? What is a cookie? Yeah, what does it store?
Password or links.
Username, password. You typically username, password, right? It could be any kind of information. It's just a key value pair, cookie name and a cookie's value. Fine, cookie name and cookie value. Fine, but where is it? Who is storing? Where is it stored?
Browser.
Browser is the one, right? Okay, how is it being managed? How are the cookies going to be organized? Why does it decide to send a cookie? When should it send the cookie?
If we are visiting some
Okay,
sites frequently,
okay, but so what do you think? Like, okay, I have maybe I've logged in into Yahoo. When I logged in into Yahoo, I said, okay, remember me. Who is going to remember? The browser. What it has to remember?
username, password.
Okay, because you ticked here while giving a request, and therefore it is remembering.
So then also it will be same.
Why should it remember? It has to be set. Who is setting the cookies? The cookies are managed by the browser, but who is setting the cookies? It is the server who asks the browser, you remember this for me. And it's nothing but the server asking the browser, you remember this for me. Next time, whenever you connect, you give me this. Okay, next time, whenever you are connecting, you need to be giving this. So the browser is actually organizing your cookie server wise. This is the host for which I have these cookies. He has asked me to remember this. Fine.
Why server wants to have this cookies as well?
Why server wants to?
Have this cookies from the client to store it.
Huh, why should it have? So that it can remember this client. See, the username and password, if you're thinking, right? The username and password for Yahoo needs to be sent only to Yahoo. Fine. So Yahoo says next time when you connect, when someone says just the yahoo.com and he's not even going to go to the login page, right? Whenever he sends me this, fine, you send me these in your headers. You send me these are the cookies. So cookies come as headers again. Cookies are also going to be part of header. Yes, it's saying, okay, yes, it's saying, okay, I want to go to that Yahoo, any page in Yahoo. Because you have connected to Yahoo, what the browser is doing, oh, you entered your host name. Oh, this host, are there any cookies? Oh, there are. Put that header. What the server is doing on the Yahoo side? If you have headers, I don't need to show you the login page. If you have headers, let me check, verify whatever comes in the headers as cookies, username and password. Let me confirm. Fine. If they are valid, okay, you don't need to be going to the login page. If they're not valid or there are no cookies, go to the login page. Otherwise, okay, go to the content you want. Straight away I can give you the response. No authentication needed. Yeah. So cookies are nothing but they have to be managed by server on the client. So cookies are organized on the client server wise, URL wise. Sometimes only for URL specific. If that's a URL, only then. Okay, it's not fine. Clear? So information about authentication information plus cookies information, all such things require header. Header is used for all these things. So you got various headers, fine. So there'll be a header called cookie colon, and then yes, there's a syntax in which a number of cookies will be sent. So a single header but has multiple values because there'll be multiple cookies here. Okay, fine. The kind of request, what can be your request line is clear, right? It has method. What are the HTTP methods? Most commonly used ones are get and post. Get and post are most common. Okay, fine. Typically, we also can, there are cases where even head can be used. A client would send a head request, fine, in order to only receive the headers and not the content from the response. It is not interested in the full response. It just says, if I send you this, you send me what will be the kind of headers which will be there. In response also, we have got a similar syntax. We haven't seen the syntax for the response. So the response, I don't want to see the whole response. I don't want the content in the response. I only want to see the headers. Okay, so that's a head request. Right. Then the other request also. Okay, you have other methods which are put, delete, yeah, put, delete, yeah, then trace, option, okay. So these are nothing but some typical HTTP method. Only thing here, yeah, these are from 1.0. This was added in 1.1, and these are added from 1.1. Okay. See, with protocol, methods have been added. Protocol change, even headers, the typical headers. Some headers have been deprecated, some headers have been added. Okay, new headers have come in a newer version of HTTP. When HTTP initially started, which was the first version for HTTP? Huh? Okay, initially they had an experimental version 0.9, right, which was, it didn't use headers. That was without headers. Okay, fine. Headers, what it can have? Cookies, fine. Information about, yeah, content, to describe content if there is content. Fine, you may not always have content. Okay, information about the browser, fine. Authentication related information, fine, if he has been authenticated. Okay, mainly, and plus capabilities of the browser. I'm capable of, you can send me compressed format and the option. Okay, I support so and so type of images. I understand GIF images. I understand JPEG images. When all that information is to be sent through headers. And then the content part, right? Okay, fine. Coming to HTTP response. And what does the HTTP response look like? Almost similar things. Fine. In response, what we have is the response also starts with fine. Okay, if we look at it, a very quite similar trend, similar thing. You can say we have a response line. First line is a response line. Then it is followed by headers. Fine. A number of header lines will be there. A blank line to indicate end of headers. And after the blank line, you have your content. Okay. So response looks like this. Fine. Similar thing, right? Okay. Let's look at the typical response line. What does a response line look like? Okay, the first line. The first line starts with protocol version, followed by status code, and then it is followed by message, status message. Some message corresponding to the status code. And then of course there are headers. But the headers, we have headers even in request and we have headers in response. So there are certain headers which are allowed only for request. Fine, there will be certain headers which are allowed only the response part. The headers which are common to both also. When the headers common to both will be nothing but the headers which are describing the content. Content is being exchanged. This is a protocol for exchanging content. Client can send content. The server is also sending back content. It's for exchanging content basically. The idea of HTTP. Hypertext transfer. Yes, it's not only transferring hypertext. Any kind of content can be transferred. Okay, fine. We have a header which says MIME type. The content type is nothing but your MIME type basically. Okay, so yeah, typically how does it look like? This one. The first line, protocol version. So it might say HTTP/1.1. Status code is a 3-digit code. Fine, status code, 3-digit code. A normal status code typically, yeah. हाँ? हाँ? शायद बीच में गई होगी हाँ